My name is Rachel Moss. I'm an executive function coach and professional development specialist with Educational Connections. I work with students every day working on these kinds of issues with procrastination. So, everybody I talk to, whether it is parents that I'm talking to for my students or the students themselves, they are worried about procrastination. So many times, parents see the issue even though the kids might not. Now, with students, I get to hear about how procrastination feels to them. Sometimes it can feel motivating because that like last minute crunch gives them like power to like lock in and get the work done. But I also hear a lot that procrastination feels uncomfortable, producing tons of anxiety. But students are aware of their habits, and as adults who care about kids, we really see how harmful this stuff is. And like I said before, share all your questions as you're thinking of them. And I just want to make sure that when we're talking about procrastination today, we're focusing on academic procrastination. I mean, I just shared with you, I've got an IKEA bag full of clean, but not that folded laundry. So I'm not the lady to help with every procrastination task, but with those academics, it's so important that we help our middle and high school students because those procrastination tasks are high stakes. When it comes down to our grades, we have to make sure that we have good strategies. So we're going to dive right in and we're going to talk about the procrastination cycle to start us off. And so I have a nice little infographic here that has this procrastination cycle. And I want us to think of this like a slippery slope. So even like kind of the herky-jerky arrows, this is a slippery slope into the land of procrastination. So the first thing that happens is at the top of our infographic, a task appears. It can be literally any task. But since we're talking about academic procrastination, we're going to talk about this in terms of those academics. So let's say the task appears, it is a vocab packet. The first thing that happens to us is we start to have unhelpful thoughts and assumptions. And you have probably heard your favorite learner say some of these, like, oh, God, I'm no good at vocab. Why am I even going to do this? I don't know what any of these words mean. Or maybe you hear things like, oh my God, this is a 4-page packet. This is 20 words. Like, and I got to write all these sentences for them. Like, I don't have time to do this right now. I got to wait to do this when I have time. Or you might hear, oh, you know what? This is 20 words. This is going to take me a minute. I'll just do it at breakfast tomorrow. And then I'll be like fresh, and I can just do it then. I don't have to do this right now. You might also hear things like, "Oh, I'm just so tired. I got to put my feet up after school." Whatever it comes out as, this is an unhelpful thought or assumption. It might be more negative, it might be more positive, but it is not doing anything to get the task done. And within that unhelpful thought and assumption, we also have an articulation of perceived discomfort. So whenever the unhelpful thoughts and assumptions come out, they are unhelpful because they are actually creating a feeling of anxiety or a feeling of wanting to escape. Even if you hear something from your favorite learner like, oh, well, this isn't going to take me that much time to do. I can just do this at breakfast. The perceived discomfort, you don't want to do the thing right now, you want to escape it, right? So the perceived discomfort, you got to get away from this task that you don't want to do. And then we engage in a procrastination task or activity. Now, sometimes we engage in one that's actually pretty productive. For example, I have a student on my roster. We were working together on Sunday, and he's in high school. He has a calculus class, and he has a history class. And the history class, he doesn't like it. He had work that is due on Tuesday. Today we were working on Sunday. And he's like, you know what? I actually have to get this calculus packet done first. I said, okay, when's the calculus packet due? Well, in 2 weeks. Okay, my dude, the history packet is due in like 2 days. So it may seem at first that, well, that's good, the kid's working on something academic, but it's really switching around the priorities. So sometimes the procrastination task can be something very valuable, but it's really messing up with like the immediacy of tasks or what really needs to get done. Many times when we think about our favorite learners and procrastination, we think about the non-productive tasks, the more pleasure-seeking tasks. So instead of doing homework, we're gonna, play a video game, we're gonna take a nap, we're gonna FaceTime with our friends, we're gonna scroll on our phone. Those are also escapist activities. So it might be that, we have different ways that this manifests, but it is some kind of activity that takes us away from the task we want to escape from. What we get from the procrastination task is a short-term reward. But whatever that is, it always has negative long-term consequences. When I was working with my student on Sunday, I talked to him about like ways we could get things done. We ended up doing about 15 minutes on the calc thing that he really wanted to do. And then we worked together on the history packet so that he could have some great work on that. That was to avoid the negative long-term consequences. If that student would have just worked on calc, it could be that he had nothing done for that history assignment and was going to get a big fat goose egg in the grade book. We can also see, like with whatever our favorite learners are doing, that even when they have a task that is productive, or whether it's one of those like pleasure seeking tasks, the end result is when we avoid our work, it ends up, creating more work for us in the end. In the case of our students, it also will really affect their grades. So, as we're thinking about the procrastination cycle, and I bet everybody here is thinking about how this applies to their favorite learner, we also have to think about what type of procrastinator maybe we are, or more specifically, we have to think about what type of procrastinator our kids are. And for kids and also for adults, we fall into two different categories. Are you a functional procrastinator or a dysfunctional procrastinator? The functional procrastinator, it's always the kid who is pulling an all-nighter at their own desk. They're hard to wake up in the morning. It's like, come on, it's time for school. And oh, just 10 more minutes. I stayed up all night doing that paper. And it's like, oh, okay, that kid's really committed to work. That's a functional procrastinator because they are getting the work done and they're not really involving anybody else. But the word functional here is really misleading. This isn't like, oh, this is cool. This is a great way for kids to get work done. This is a terrible way for kids to get work done. But what we have to think about is when I talk with kids about this, I actually will ask them how much drama is involved in your procrastination. Is it just something that you're dealing with, or is everybody else folded in? The dysfunctional procrastinator is the kid who, like, classic, hey mom, it's 7 p.m. Hey mom, I need some help with this paper I have to turn in tomorrow. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll be right up. You go up to the desk, you look over the kid's shoulder. They have a 3-page research paper due. They have to have 2 sources, and there is nothing done. There are no sources picked out. There is not one word on that page. And suddenly they have to get this done, and they are asking other people to come in for help. So this is a dynamic. And sometimes we have procrastination in the same kid that's functional, and then we'll have some that is dysfunctional, where maybe they're procrastinating on their own time for one project, but then they are going to fold everything in. No matter what kind of procrastinator you have, we have to talk about why we need strategies for this, because chronic procrastination always leads to long-term negative consequences. Procrastination is difficult to deal with because the negative consequences are not always immediate. So sometimes, the kid stays up all night to do the paper, and it's a Hail Mary, it's a Hail Mary play. And it comes out where, hey, oh my God, I got this done and I got an A. That's reinforcing the behavior. Sometimes it turns out where the procrastination leads to an immediate negative consequence. But whatever it is, all of that stuff starts to snowball. and it's linked to increases in stress. A lot of times when I'm working with students in sessions, I'll hear a lot of negative self-talk when we start to talk about procrastination. And I'm an educator. I'm not a mental health expert, but that negative self-talk to me always is ways for kids to express feelings of maybe like being a little bit depressed about how they behave or anxious about their behavior. Things like, oh, I'm so lazy. I can never get anything done. And I make myself crazy. And, I make my family crazy because I can never get anything done. Those are things you might hear from your own kid. The other thing that happens with chronic procrastination, I mean, this is like a no-brainer, it's chronic fatigue. Kids or who are staying up all night to get their work done because they're waiting till the last minute, they're not able to perform as quickly. They're run down for no good reason. So, with all of this in mind, we have to start to talk about strategies to help our favorite learners. And we have to tap into the power of executive function. So, when I talk to my students, I always use like a metaphor of someone driving a car when I talk about executive function. So we have our little brainy guy in the center here of all of the executive function skills. And I want us to imagine, like, we have a little guy in our head who's steering things for us. And so when I start to talk to kids, um, I want to see how their procrastination kind of influences some of these executive function skills. The biggest one I always see first is emotional control. If you are highly anxious about your work, if you are waiting till the last minute to do your work, you are definitely having big emotions about your academic work. And so that's one of the first ones that I see that'll come out where it's like, oh, okay, we need to get this emotion about this work under control and figure out why we hate this so badly that we don't want to do it, or why we're avoiding this so much, so that we can have everything else start to work. Another one that we see with procrastination is a lack of task initiation. And that is simply, I'm going to pick up a task and start it. So if we think about that driver metaphor, here we have our executive functions in a different sort of little graphic. If we're procrastinating, the foot is on the brake. Okay. So here we have all of our gears, all of our executive functions are working together. When we procrastinate, that foot is pushed down on that brake, and none of these are working together at all. Whenever it's time for the kid to start working, the foot comes off the brake, but now it's like a cartoon where steam is coming out of the gears and everything's going really fast. And now we have gears like flying all over the place because, we've waited too long to get the work done. So when we procrastinate too much, we are actually getting stuck. And so, if we think about procrastination in terms of how it affects executive function, we can use some great strategies to start to get these gears turning and get that foot off of the brake. So, now we're going to start to talk our strategies. And all of these strategies are designed to help facilitate conversations with your favorite learner. One of the things as an educator that I always kind of find maddening, like when I'm working with a student, and these are my thoughts, this isn't like what comes out of my mouth, but my thought is always, kid, why are you doing this? I mean, maybe somebody else feels like this when you're watching a child you love and they're procrastinating. You might be thinking to yourself, why is this kid doing this? It's very hard for us to understand. So, all of our strategies are about facilitating conversations so that we can understand what's going on and then help our favorite learner with new ways of doing things. Because if we can understand the root of like why they're procrastinating, we can gently challenge that and we can lead them to try new things. So, our first strategy is noticing procrastination patterns. I would bet dollars to donuts as I start to go through these, everyone in here that is here caring about a student, a child that they love, you are immediately going to notice the patterns. I would not be So willing to bet that all the kids are noticing patterns, but we as the adults are. So when we notice procrastination, we may notice, first of all, that our favorite learner is procrastinating with anything that isn't interesting. I have a student on my roster who he is a gifted scientist. He is in advanced like science classes. He is so far ahead in his one class that's self-paced. He's almost done with it and it's February. Anything that is interesting to him, he's on it. But the stuff that isn't interesting to him, his foreign language class, like when am I ever going to use French? You know what I mean? Not interesting to me. I don't want to do that right now. So we may notice that when a student has a topic, a type of work that is just like, oh my God, this is like eye-rollingly boring, they're going to procrastinate on that. Sometimes we notice that when students perceive things as being hard, they are going to procrastinate on that. So this is, another example from all the kids that I work with. Another one of my students is is taking their first like AP classes this year. And there is a ton of procrastination on anything for the AP class. This kid has it in their head that, oh, this is way too hard for me. I shouldn't be in this class. You know what? I can do this later. I'll get my teacher to help me with it. I'll work with, my group in class. Anything that's hard, anything about that AP class, they want to avoid that like the plague. The biggest one that I have seen my entire career, I am a literature teacher as well as an executive function expert. So I have taught thousands of children at the high school and college level how to write papers. Whenever there is something long-term and multi-step, that is going to be a procrastination like lightning rod. In my experience, and I'm going to talk about papers because I think everybody has probably seen this type of thing, or you can think about a speech, a science fair project. They are only thinking about the end result. So for me as an educator, every time I assigned a paper, I would have students who were like, "Well, I don't really need to do this right now. I mean, it's only like 3 pages. It's only 3 pages." They're not thinking about the fact that in order to write the paper, they have to go to the library, they have to read sources, they have to write about those sources in their own words, they have to make sure they can understand everything that they've read. They're only thinking about, well, in 2 months, I have to write 3 pages, not all of the steps in between. So this is probably the first thing that you're going to do. This is also a great way to facilitate conversation because you can talk to your favorite learner and say, look, you're not doing this all the time, but I don't know. Could there be a little pattern here? This is a great way to start to facilitate conversation. To help us with this, we're going to put a link in the chat, and this is a downloadable for you. A little it's like a little worksheet and it's called Discover Your Procrastination Style. And it is a list of questions that you can go through yourself. I've done this. I've done this with kids where I will, use it in our lesson space and I will answer in our lesson space. We have like different colors and stuff we can write on the screen. I'll answer in one color and the kid will answer in another so that we can have a conversation about, oh yeah, that's what I do when I procrastinate. This isn't a diagnostic. This is a way to facilitate maybe difficult conversations because so many times with procrastination, students can feel like they're being accused of something or they're being bad by doing this kind of stuff. But this is a way to say, look, everybody does this, but we have to have strategies because this is high stakes in academics. This could end up in grades that don't reflect how very smart you are. So I do want to talk about the procrastination types because this is another way for us to facilitate conversations to kind of know our favorite learner. Maybe even as I talk about these, this will resonate with you, you know? This will like help them understand what's going on. And Joy just said in the chat, how do we talk to our learners about procrastination patterns, or how do we get them to understand or care that this is a problem? This is a path. So one of the things you can do, Joy, you can use this kind of little like little like document. It's great because anything that's outside of us, it kind of takes a little bit of the body heat off. It's like, look, I'm not accusing you of anything. We're going to put this conversation in a neutral place on a piece of paper and kind of talk about like how we are. So I think that as you know, we talk about these a little bit, you might resonate with this and be like, "Oh, I this is my kid." So we have some procrastination types like the defier. This is the kid where do not bug them about the work. Oh, my teacher's always nagging me. My mom's always nagging me. Oh my God, I'm so sick of this. Just people need to leave me alone so I can get the work done. We also have kids who are perfectionists. Perfectionists and overdoers to me, especially as somebody who taught a lot of advanced literature classes. They were always they were always besties in the honors and AP Lit classes. The perfectionist is the kid who holds themselves to a very high standard. Not only are they going to do perfect work, they have to wait for the perfect time. They are like plotting this out. You know, they have like tarot cards, a candle, like they're saging the area so that everything, the vibes are just right. They can't do the work until everything is perfect. The overdoer and the perfectionist to me, they always hang out together. The overdoer is the kid who is actually adding on more stuff on top of what they're already doing because they want to be the best. And these some of these are very admirable pursuits. Like kids who, okay, you get the science fair project. They're not just going to make, the standard volcano. They are going to travel. They're going to study the volcano. They're going to, dig into the rock itself. Or the kid where they get assigned, you have to write, like a two paragraph response. I'm going to write 10 pages. I need to show this teacher that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm very, very serious. So sometimes we have kids that are actually giving themselves more work. That leads to procrastination. We also have kids who are dreamers that I know I have a student I worked with a couple years ago who is at that point a middle schooler. And when I started talking to him about procrastination, he's like, you know what? I mean, like, here's the thing. Sure, I'm not doing my stuff for my civics class, but like, I'm going to go to Harvard and you don't have to take civics in Harvard. It's like, this is true, but my good man, you are in eighth grade right now. And we have to get this done so that you can achieve that goal. So sometimes our procrastination is really focused in the future. We also have the crisis maker. I had a student that I worked with for a number of years who point blank told me, Rachel, I can't get anything done until it's the last minute. I need the last minute. If I don't have that, I have no motivation to get everything done. We also have the worrier, the one who is procrastinating, and as the time is ticking down, they are getting so scared. And the only way to get away from those really negative anxiety feelings is to avoid, avoid, avoid. So once we kind of like have facilitated this conversation, and Charlene says, yeah, I have a big time to fire. She does not actually get the work done. I have tried to choose whether I want to argue with her before the fact or after the fact. You know what, Charlene? This could be a way to depersonalize the conversation, to maybe, because she's going to be picking the answers off of that little like worksheet, right? This could be a way to start that conversation. But where do you go from there? Like, you can't be like, well, you're under fire, done with that. No, we need some good conversation starters. So that's our second strategy. After we have worked, had this conversation with our kids, and I really do think if you want to do this with a learner you love, you do it too. You show them what kind of procrastinator you are. I personally am the worrier. I run high on anxiety and high on energy. So whenever I procrastinate, it becomes very, very awful for me in my headspace. And I share that with my students so that they feel like, they know that they're not alone, that adults do this kind of stuff too. But whenever you identify what kind of procrastinator you have, we have to have some good conversation starters. So, hey, um, so tell me about the sense that you have that it would be better to do this right before it's due rather than to start it now. This is one I use all the time, because like the kid's like, well, I I need to do this before the thing is done. And then what I'll say to them, I shared with you, I'm a worrier type of procrastination. So honestly, in my thinking, that would make me go crazy if I was going to do something right before it was due. Tell me what your thinking is like. You know, the one at the very bottom, I really like, especially when I'm working with a student who's a defier. You know what? You keep telling me this teacher is harping on you about this work. Why do you think everybody's bugging you about this? What do you think that's about? All of these conversation starters are here to get at the root of what the kid is thinking. Because I shared this before. When I'm working with a kid who is a procrastinator, my number one question is, kid, why are you doing this? So these are ways that after we kind of see where we are, we can make sure that we are having productive conversations with the kids that we love. And then okay, so after we start the conversation, um, we want to engage in planning. So the next part of our strategies, these kind of all go together like a little string of Christmas lights. Okay, so we've identified what kind of procrastinator we have. Even if we have a defier, this is great because this strategy, and this is another printable for you, is a way to plan things out together. Because a lot of times, the way that we work is very different from how our children work. When I was in college, for example, and I think I've told this story before, because I always tell it to my students too. I used to have DVDs of my favorite stand-up comedians playing in the background when I would read and write all my papers. And this was kind of maddening. Like I don't think my mom understood that I was just essentially tuning it out. Like I knew all the routines. I knew where all the laughter was. It was like background noise. It was predictable for me. It wasn't anything very exciting because like I knew these things so well. But that was weird. Like why would that help me do work? Sometimes I hear from parents, well, it's because the kids listening to all this like loud music that they can't get work done. I gotta be real with you. When I was a teenager, I was listening to like some loud techno all the time, and that was something that would seem disruptive. So we might also like tap into what was our headspace as kids. I know now as an adult, I need quiet to do my work. Like my whole mind has changed as I've grown older. But this is a way to see like where our students are as far as their work is concerned and where like we are. It also helps them self-identify what are the things that help me and what are the things that actually take away from my focus. So like some students will tell me I can't get any work done in class because there's too many people moving around, there are noises that they can't predict, all that kind of stuff, you know. So if you can use this strategy, and it's in the chat as well, it's a nice little printable. This can be a way for you to talk about, okay, what sort of environment do you need at home so that you can get your work done? After we figure out like the optimal way to get our work done, we now have to engage in planning. And we had some questions above, like about things like due dates. I know that one of our folks wrote in a questions about, oh yeah, what digital tool can encourage my student to maybe take notes, note due dates, things like that. So one of the things I do want to address that because you specifically asked Joy about like a digital tool. There is no app, there is no planner, there is no thing that you buy that automatically you purchase it and it fixes the problem. What we need to do is we need to work on a skill. Once we have a skill, we can then add in something that will help it. So I explain to this to parents and kids using like something that I love to do. I love to knit. I can knit with like two takeout chopsticks and make something beautiful because I have a skill. I can also knit with the finest materials available and make something beautiful because I have a skill. If I don't have that skill, I can spend money on cashmere yarn and needles made out of gold, and it's not going to do anything for me. So let's talk about the kind of skill that we need. The skill to really help with procrastination is backwards planning. So backwards planning means that we use two things. We use the kids' calendar, and here I have a screen cap of a student's like learning management system. Maybe they have a physical planner, and we use the directions. And what we want to do is we want to figure out all of the things that they have to do and the final things. So we have to make sure that they know all of the parts of the assignment. This is specifically for anything with a lot of different parts. Anything with a lot of different parts, you are going to have the worrier is going to be worrying. The perfectionist is going to be like, well, I need to wait until, I need to have this big project perfect because this is a big grade. The overdoer is adding on additional steps. We need to ground this in reality for all of them. For the dreamer that's like, well, I've got time to do this. Like, okay, well, let's stay in the here and now and figure out when is the thing due and when are all of the parts due. And so we put the final thing in the calendar first, and then we look through it and we figure out all the other things that we have to do. To help figure out all of the parts, we can use a checklist instead of the teacher created directions. And this is another great skill for students to have. Because honestly, when you're working with middle and high school students, they have like, 6 or 7 different teachers. Not every teacher writes things the same way. Not every teacher presents things the same way. So let's get a system, let's get a skill in place so that they can have something to help with procrastination. So not only are we going to put in all of the things that are specifically stated in these directions, you're also going to note that in the checklist, we have steps that are implied. So notice we have, this is like a topic about Julius Caesar for like a history class. We have to pick a topic. The deadline for that is the 29th of April. The directions never say go to the library. The directions never say read anything after school. But the directions do say find 2 sources. So we've added in go to the library after school so that the student understands that is part of it. That is assigned to you, even though it's not explicitly stated. In number 3, okay, we have here that you have to have 2 sources from the library, but we have another step that we've added in. You may have to read more than 2 things. I mean, for goodness sake, maybe the first book that you pull off the shelf isn't about, Julius Caesar. Maybe it's about Augustus Caesar, or maybe it's about like Hadrian, a later Roman emperor. So we have to make sure that that like kids would realize there's more to this than just the stuff that is like explicitly written here. So we also have in things like, okay, here's the final due date. Here's how many pages the paper has to be. Taking the directions that the kids get and having them make a checklist. This is something where now they are working within what they have to do, and they are also seeing all of the steps, not just those final steps. And this works with any subject. I worked with a student the other night. We did this for a math class where the students have to go through the problems and then they also have to write out the answers in a certain way. You know what I mean? So it's like we looked through the directions and then we made our checklist of like, what are all the steps here? I have students I've been working with for a couple years and they are doing this on their own. This is something where at first you need some hand holding, you need some scaffolding, but then because this works, kids will start to do this on their own. This isn't immediate. This is going to be gradual growth, but this is going to work. So throughout this whole darn webinar, I have been talking about all of the kids that I work with in my sessions. And that's because I'm an executive function coach here at Educational Connections. I work with kids all day long in hour-long sessions, and we are working through 4 steps in every single session. First, we check in on all of their work, what's due, what's going well, look at the learning management system together, take notes, chunk out directions, make sure that we are checking everything that they need to do, due dates, past due dates, all that type of stuff. We have to then figure out what's due. We have to prioritize work, get everything in some kind of organizational system, on a calendar, in a notebook. So we not only look at what they have due, but we also plan. We then work. We tackle the worrisome assignments. We work collaboratively. Sometimes students will work for a bit solo, and then we always reflect on what is working. How are we feeling about these academic tasks? How is this kind of making us want to procrastinate right now? How did it feel to not procrastinate right now? And I got to share this with everybody. The number one answer that I get when I have a kid that does that is, "Oh wow, this feels really good. Like I'm really less worried." I actually had a kid not too long ago say, "This is empowering," which I thought was like, mwah, vocab, but also a beautiful thing to hear a kid share. We anticipate obstacles that kids are going to have. Um, and so, this is kind of like what we do in a nutshell. I see that there's a lot of questions in our chat. Before I get to the questions, I do want to make sure to share with you, we have a QR code. We're going to have a link in the chat. If you're interested in any of our executive function coaching, you are going to talk to one of these wonderful professionals here on our screen, work with one of our program managers. Every one of our coaches is paired with a student. So not only are you getting an amazing educator working with your favorite learner, and Marissa, the coaching is virtual. It is one-on-one. I'm going to go back one slide. We use a platform called Lesson Space. And it's amazing. And it has a lot of advantages over in person. The number one for me, I've done in person, I've done virtual. Every minute is focused on the kids' work. There's no, oh, come in the house, pet the dog. Do you want a drink of water? It's like, hey, how's it going? 2 minutes of small talk, share your screen, let's go. The other thing I love about it is their work is all digital. This is a digital platform. I don't have to hunker over some kid's shoulder looking at a little Chromebook screen to get a sense of what the kid is working on. We can work on things and see things in real time. So if you are interested, I'm going to leave this up on the screen for the first part of our Q&A so that you can scan that QR code, and learn a little bit more. Okay, so I know I talked about some of these, but I want to go back up to the top. Okay, so we have a question. This was like at the beginning. What do you recommend we do for when they ask for help? But it's a ploy. I love this phrasing, but it's a ploy to get the parent to do the work. My God, have I also experienced those ploys. So one of the things that I do as an educator is my first thing is I play a little bit dumb. I'm like, okay, so wait a minute. I don't get this. Can you remember anything your teacher said about this? Okay, so, and then like I start like listening to them explaining, pulling a little bit more out of them. Wow, you really know a lot about this. Do you think do you think like maybe you could do 15 minutes and do like a little bit of this and then we could check in? Like, I don't know. I always think about it like as the dumb teacher, because that's my role with the students I work with. But I think like, it could be like dumb mom, dumb dad, whatever, that kind of stuff. And I know sometimes with teenagers when I do this, I get a lot of frustration. Like, oh, it's so easy. Like, how do you know? Like, I thought like you were a teacher. I thought you would know this. No, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. This is one thing I don't know. Whenever I do notice that a kid is kind of having a ploy to get me to do the work, I always try to use ways to get them to do the work without calling them out on what I know that they're doing. Because honestly, when they're going to do that ploy for attention, it's a stress response. And I really want to make sure that I'm doing something that's calming for the kid and not something that's going to cause more stress. Okay, so scrolling down for the rest of our beautiful questions. Okay, I have an elementary student that does not have a ton of homework but does struggle with writing and spelling. How would you help them if they don't have specific assignments to help them? So I want to full disclosure. So I'm a high school and a college level teacher. So the only reason I'm sharing that is because I want to make sure that I'm saying like what my areas of expertise are, and that I want to make sure that I am also like giving good advice for a younger like student age. So I think that there are some great ways to engage students with these types of things. One thing that I do know that can be really lovely for younger students with writing and spelling is to engage them with like writing their own stories. So, for example, and it doesn't have to be, maybe you have a student that doesn't want to write original things, but maybe like let's say your student really loves like superheroes. Maybe together you could write their own stories about their favorite superhero. So, like an Iron Man adventure between your little learner and Iron Man. And you can do this with them in a variety of ways. Maybe the first time you are taking dictation and writing down the story, and then you read it to them. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, chapter two, oh, my hand's tired. How about if you write it down? And then you can go through and you can like spell check together. You can work on like the sentence structure together, getting them to engage with writing something that they would be interested in, and then have them work through the process of making it better. You can also, like for this type of strategy, you could talk to them about like, okay, well, you know what, your story is so good. We need to make this into a book. But now to make it into a book, we have to make sure all of our spelling is correct. All of this, stuff is just perfect. So I'm looking at the time here. We do have some more questions. I'm willing to answer some more. If anybody has to go, we do have a replay of our webinar that you can review. But I would love to answer as many of these questions as I can. So I just want to put that out there. Okay, so we have somebody that asked about the student identifying their study environment. In terms of the best environment they identify as best way to study, kids say that they work best with music. This isn't always the case. If they're singing along, their attention is being split. How do we challenge whether or not music is actually the best way to study? Okay, so this is one that I hear all the time. I think that this could be something where you could ask the student to kind of observe behavior. So, okay, you set a goal that you were going to work on this for 20 minutes, and your favorite songs came on and you were bebopping around. How much stuff did you get done? You know what I mean? Sometimes I have had students before. I had a student I worked with through the last years of high school, and she transitioned out of sessions when she went into college. She would sing during every session, and I'm watching her screen. This little thing is tippity typing away and singing her little songs and moving and grooving in her seat. So I've seen it both ways. I'm not saying that this isn't something that's a concern, but I do think that sometimes, and I know this from myself as a younger student, I had things that would help me lock in, and it didn't seem as if it did, but I really was doing my work. So I would say like maybe like have the student reflect on, okay, how much did you get done? Oh, maybe you were bebopping too much. Maybe we need something different. Okay, so Peter asked, what is the typical length of time for coaching to help a student develop these skills independently? So Peter, that is going to depend on the kid. This isn't an add water and stir kind of thing. This isn't like, turn the box over, put it in the air fryer, and it's done in 15 minutes. But what I will say is that we start to see results I would say after about a semester, because we have extra measures of accountability. We have ways of talking to students that are really about taking the stress off of them. One of the things I always say is that I am not in the business of giving my kids more school after school. My job is to help take the pressure off of them, help to ease the burden of learning while helping to support the rigor of learning. So I think that it's a very unique and beautiful way to connect with students. But I would say that depending upon different factors, it may be a little bit less time, it may be a little bit longer. I think that everybody has heard in this webinar the majority of kids I'm working with, I've worked with them for years. This isn't because, they still are where they were at the beginning. It's because our coaching really works. And coaching is such an apt word for what we do. And I want you to think about whatever sport or whatever exercise you do. I'm a Pilates girly, so it's like when I work with a coach, my form is correct. I know how to do the things at home. I know what I'm doing well. I can get to the next level. That's what we're doing in our continued coaching too. Oh, and Kelly, thank you for sharing that you can attest to the efficacy of virtual. Something else that I'm kind of reading in your comment, Kelly, that you didn't think that your kid would do well with virtual. I hear that all the time. One of my observations as a coach is I think there's a privacy about the virtual tutoring that is so wonderful for kids, where it's like, look, this is at home, this is no big deal. So I'm so glad that that's a positive experience for you. Okay, so Stephanie says I have a 14-year-old with inattentive ADHD that's dealing with time blindness and executive dysfunction. How do you clarify the difference between the child's needs versus laziness? At 14, I feel as if I am getting more feedback from school that he can do better if he tried harder. Okay, so there's no IEP and public schools didn't work for him. I think Stephanie, like in this question, I'm kind of hearing too, like that teenage ennui, where it's like we don't know, like, is the kid just not doing anything, or you know, is there a bigger issue here? Um, I think that especially with ADHD, time blindness is a huge thing. There is a strategy that we love, and it's called the Pomodoro method. The Pomodoro method, probably we have a page about it, or I think that like Melissa's probably going to put something in the chat. I know her. The Pomodoro method uses a timer, but it's not in order to make a kid work faster. The timer is designed so that the kid gets a sense of how much they can do in a set amount of time. So for example, I have kids that deal with time blindness, and this is the first strategy I use. In my sessions, I call it a mini Doro. We do a 15-minute work session, and after that work session is over, I reflect with the student and ask, what did you get done in this time, and how do you feel about it? Like a basic reflection question. We can then see, oh, okay, the kid worked on math work. In 15 minutes, he got 5 problems done, and he has a total of 15 problems left to do. I can then work with the kid and say, how long do you think it's going to take you to do this? Oh, 45 minutes. Great, under an hour. So it's a very powerful way to help kids get that time sense, you know? And so that can be a really great way to go. Especially, I think that could really help, to get a handle on what's going on there. Okay. I'm just going through the little questions. Oh, Alina, there, and I saw this a couple other people asked about planners. I gotta be real with you. I am the planner lady. I have two on my desk that I personally use, because I have a skill for using planners. So this is a question that I get all the time. A planner is another thing that you buy. It doesn't do anything unless you have a skill to use it. So for a kid who refuses to use a calendar and plan ahead, there are a number of reasons for this. A kid who you get them a planner and they're like, no, I'm not using this. One of the biggest things with middle and high school kids with planners is that they are seldom private items. If somebody opened this up right now and started going through my calendar and reading what was in here, first of all, my handwriting is atrocious. It's like terrible. I don't like how I've written everything down. There's stuff in here that's like just for my brain. But for kids, everybody is going through their planners. And so many times when kids get a planner, they immediately shut down. Their teachers are putting things on their online calendars. I know in different school districts I've worked in, we had to do planner checks where the teacher has to go through the planner and look at things. Well, as far as the kid's concerned, that isn't my book, that's your book. So that's one of the big things that can hinder kids with this. So my question would be for the kid, like, why don't you want to use it? Or if this was just private to you, would you use it? Why do you think it won't work for you? Okay. Um, oh, okay. So, and then I think this is going to be the last one here. Any suggestions on helping a child who is almost 18, who struggles with initiating assignments and completing assignments, and who resists assistance or suggestion? So, Stephanie, number one, friend, that is my entire roster here at Educational Connections. Indeed, that is every teenager I have ever worked with. And I think this is year 18 for me in education. So this is, I'm also getting the sense like Stephanie, like, is this a senior? Is your student like in senior year? Because if it's senior year, there's a lot going on there. Senioritis is a real thing. Um, So the first thing that I always do when I have like a lot of defiance is I try to figure out why they are so defiant. And I actually try to figure out what is the negative thing that you don't like? Like, what is the thing that you just like is just really grinding your gears? So, for example, I had a kid on my roster when we started working together, just like he didn't want to work with me. Like, I was just essentially an agent of his nagging parents. And I said to him, I said, like, what's your deal? What's your beef here? I don't want to do this. That's cool. Awesome. But you and I are going to work together for a while. So we got to figure out a way to like, come together. And then I asked him, I said, if you could like have anything right now, what would you have? And he said, I would just have like nobody bothering me about this. And then I asked him, what would you have to do for that to happen? And it was like a very irate light bulb. Like he wasn't happy about this thought, but a light bulb went off over his head. He goes, well, like if I did all this stuff, nobody would talk to me. And I'm like, bingo. Sometimes one of the first things that we can do is we can recognize that, okay, this kid is defiant. This kid doesn't want to do this. That's valid. I mean, for my entire career as an educator, I have said to all of my students, you can hate it and still get an A. You don't have to like this thing. You can do this to get through it. I also talk to kids a lot about school skills versus life skills. This can really help with older students because kids are not dumb. It's like when you are like a vice president someday, nobody's going to be knocking on your door like, Johnson, I need that vocab on my desk by 6. That is a school skill. That is nothing everybody does in real life. Nobody like turns in math worksheets to get a paycheck. So some of this stuff that they're doing, they are just like, they're over it, you know? Having honest conversations with kids, allowing them a place to like vent their frustration can really lead to positive conversations and new ways to do things. So I'm looking at the time here. I think that this is a great time to like wrap up. I want to say thank you to every single person who came here today. This was so amazing. I do say favorite learner a lot, Stephanie. I do. Stephanie calling me out in the chat saying my phrase that I repeat a lot. So everybody hug your favorite learner for me. Thank you so much for being here. Anything that we can do, please reach out to us. And I hope to see folks again. Thank you for a beautiful lunchtime get together.